Coaching and team development seem to exist in at least two realms, in sports and in business. Are they connected? And what can one learn from one to apply to the other? Our guest today has bridged that gap and has tremendous insights for us all. Welcome to another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast, where we are helping leaders grow personally and professionally to lead more effectively and make a bigger difference for their teams, organizations, and the world. If you are listening to this podcast in the future, you could be with us live on your favorite social media channel. You can find out when those episodes are taking place so you can join us and interact with us and really get this life-changing information sooner by joining either our Facebook or LinkedIn groups, two of the channels in which these are published or broadcast. And so you can join our Facebook or LinkedIn groups to get all of that inside scoop. Just go to remarkablepodcast.com/Facebook or remarkablepodcast.com/LinkedIn to get all of that. Today's episode is brought to you by my latest book, Flexible Leadership: Navigate Uncertainty and Lead with Confidence. It's time to realize that styles can get in our way and that following our strengths might not always be the best approach. In a world more complex and uncertain than ever, leaders need a new perspective and a new set of tools to get the great results their organizations and team members want and need. That's where Flexible Leadership comes in. Hope that you will learn more and order your copy now by going to remarkablepodcast.com/flexible. And with that, let me bring in my guest, and her name is Chantal Vallée, which I can't possibly say it as well as she does. She's originally from Quebec, Canada. She is the Windsor Lancers women's basketball coach, and she transformed a last place team into a 5-time national champion. She was also the first woman worldwide to coach and manage a men's professional team, the Hamilton Honey Badgers. You can see a jersey over her head if you're watching. Guiding them to the finals in their first season. She is the co-author of the book Dare to Win, the Blueprint for Building Performance and Championship Teams. She lives in Windsor, Ontario now, and she's our guest today. Chantal, we have a little bit of feedback, but I'm so glad that you're here.
Well, good afternoon, Kevin. It's a pleasure for me to be here.
So I'll try to not talk too much so we won't have too much of that feedback. Let's just start here. Your story is interesting, right? And I hinted at it a little bit in the short bio, but like, how do you end up doing what you do? Like, tell us a little bit more about the path that leads you to being a women's basketball coach.
Well, like many young boys and girls, I played a lot of sports. I enjoyed playing sports, and I came from a very rural, small town close to Montreal, but as I grew older, there was not enough girls that wanted to be in sport and play basketball. And I was very disappointed about this. I wanted to continue. And so what happened is that the city offered me to start some mini basketball teams and camps, which I said, okay, well, I guess if I can't play, I'm going to start coaching. And slowly, this is how I started to coach until this became my profession. And I've been a professional coach now for almost 20 seasons, 20 years.
There you go. That's a great story in and of itself. And some of you who are listening or watching know that I happen to be a basketball fan. It's come up on occasion. So I'm especially excited to have you here and for us to chat. What led, though, to a book? So, like, I hinted at this in the open. So let me just say a little bit about this. Like, so you're doing coaching, and then you go to McGill and study leadership at the master's level. So I'm sure that has something to do with the book. So, like, tell us a little bit about how you end up coming to writing the book.
Yeah, so I was a graduate student at McGill University in Montreal, and I was wanting to research what makes coaches successful. For me, I wanted to find the key. I wanted to get into coaching, and I didn't want to be mediocre. I didn't want to be bottom of the pack or middle of the pack. I wanted to win championships. So I'm thinking I've got 2 to 3 years in grad school to really try to figure out what makes the best leader successful. And we really focus with my supervisor, who's now the co-author of this book. We really focus on leadership at large. So we looked at business and military, healthcare, education, and all the leaders and how they are able to transform companies or organizations. And then for the research part of it, we really went specifically into coaches of team sports. And we look into the coaches and how they transform any team into a champion. And we really studied and researched them through a research project. We ended up finding 4 higher order categories of what those successful coaches do, which are also applicable, like you mentioned, Kevin, straight into business. And we were able to prove this, publish in terms of a peer review article. We actually wrote 2. And then I went and I became the basketball coach at the University of Windsor, a team that was last for several seasons. And they had only had 4 winning seasons in about 50 years. And I applied the research that I learned. So I literally just applied it over a period of 10 years. I recontacted back my master supervisor and I said, Dr. Bloom, I think we should write a book. And he was just thinking the same thing. So what we did in the book is explain the theory so that everybody can pick it up and replicate it, but also it's filled with motivational stories throughout that make the book interesting and motivational, inspiring at the same time. So that's how we came about to write the book.
So everybody, Chantal's not going to say this, but she's not only the co-author of the book, she's the star of the book, because a lot of the book is written from the perspective of the stories from all of the basketball stuff, building the teams and the challenges and all those sorts of things along the way. So we'll talk about some of those as we go. But I really want to get into some of what you learned and then applied, because I do think, so often as leaders in businesses who happen to be sports fans, we look at sports teams, we look at sports coaches, and we tell stories about that, but we don't really think about how we can cross apply the lessons. And you've lived that. So I want us to talk about some of those things. You talk very early in the book about 3 circles hooked together that talk about these 3 things. I'm going to put them on the screen: individual growth, organizational skills, and leaders' attributes. And so I'd like you to talk a little, all of us know those words, but tell us about what you mean in each of those subsets of your research: individual growth, organizational skills, leaders' attributes. Talk about those just a little bit.
Yeah, so Kevin, at the end of it, when we had researched all the top coaches and what they had done to transform their organization, we had about 2,000 pages of notes and research notes and data that we had to go in there and analyze. And what we did is just kind of take the main, every single little topic that was addressed, we put label into these topics. And then we saw if we could group some topics and some labels together. And at the end, we found, higher order categories, which those 3 are part of it. And say, these are kind of the 3 main areas of that summarizes what coaches, successful coaches, how they are better than others at doing. And in the middle of these 3 areas is the vision. So there was kind of these 4 higher order categories, if you wish, that were out there. And so for the vision, since you have it now on the screen for a quick second, the vision became kind of the central piece of what makes every leader successful. So without a vision, there was just work, but not an achievement of any kind of significant goal for the organization. But with a vision that said, for example, so when I took Windsor, I just took my research and says, well, I know we're last in the country, but I want to transform this program and bring it to be national champion in 5 years. That was a clear vision. And the visions have to be always on the verge of a little bit seemingly not sure if it's going to be possible. And from there, you then divide it in subcategories where you put achievable goals and where you can put your KPIs and get to target those. But the vision has to be substantially kind of like grandiose in a way. What the coaches did, they all did that. Somebody that had never won anything would say, we want to win a gold medal. We want to get to this level. And then on the right side of the circles, they're taking this organizational skills. And that in itself is all the planning, the management, and administration part of the job of any leader. And a leader that isn't good at that is not going to be as successful into implementing the vision. So it's really about learning to develop that side of each leaders as well. on the left side of the model, there's the individual growth, which the research showed that the leaders that really invest in their subordinates or coaches invest in the players for the sake of their individual growth and not for the sake of winning, find that they are more successful, and winning becomes a byproduct of this. And so there's a transformational process in the player or the subordinate that happens in that relationship and that search for help for individual growth that is very beneficial to the overall vision. And the last piece is the leader's attribute, which is that coaches tend to think, or leaders tend to think, that to be good at something, you have a skill that needs to be somewhat balanced, somewhat in the middle. So you can be tough or caring. You got to be a little bit of both in the middle. But the research shows that you have to be all of these. So not just balance, but you need to be able to go absolutely on the left side of the spectrum, absolutely on the right side of the spectrum, and choose the right moment to really embody that leadership trait when it's needed at the right time, which is very difficult to do.
Everybody, she's talking about the core idea in my new book, Flexible Leadership, right there. It's not about either or, it's about both and. 100%, I agree with that. I want to go back to the organizational skills circle or chunk of the model. Would it be safe to say, and I'm not trying to change your words, but to clarify, would it be safe to say that most of what we think of as management skills fits into that one of the circles? Is that a fair thing to say?
Yeah, so the management skill is interesting because I think there's been a long confusion with leadership where people confuse being a leader and being a manager. And they're two completely different things. And so you can have really good leaders that can inspire and say, we're going to do this, but they're terrible manager of people. They're terrible managers of their time. So there's some difference there to make. So in that particular circle, which is organizational skills, what we did at the time is really put in things that were more of organizational nature. We didn't really portray this as being managing people per se. So we talk about planning, administrative tasks, preparing a season. In terms of coaching, maybe the prioritization part of an athlete for peaking and things like that. So, achieving targets. This was that category. In terms of managing people, it would reflect a little bit more in the category of the individual growth and the leader's attribute, where now the soft skill of a person is clearly demonstrated through these two categories of that research.
One of the things that I really liked about the book is, and it's early in the book, in the section where you're talking about vision, is your 5-year plan that you laid out for the Lancers when you joined them as coach, with a long history, as you just said, of not being very good, and a 5-year goal of being national champions. And so it's like a one-pager, at least it appears to be from looking at it in the book. And one of the things that you said was, even as you were recruiting players, you were using that one-pager, if you will, that plan, that long-term 5-year plan, as a part of your recruitment, or your recruitment strategy to select the people that you wanted to have join your team. Talk a little bit more about the idea of that 5-year plan, and then how you did in fact use it with your teams.
Yeah, so when I envisioned winning a championship, I realized I didn't have at the moment the team capable of doing that. So we needed to go and recruit. Players were also graduating, so there was going to be a changeover in the players that we had. And so when you shop, so how we recruit is that, we identify the players and we do home visits. So when I showed up to the home visit, I would bring a binder and I would explain my vision. So I know we're not really good right now, but if you stick with us, if you decide to come play here in 5 years, here's where we're going to be, and here's going to be your experience. So I was using this as an inspirational tool, but also a show of there is a vision here. We're not just coming to try to be the best and go by the seat of our pants. We're intentional. We have an intention. We have a desire. We have emotions geared toward this, and application as well towards really transforming this program. So that was very useful, because some recruits and some parents would say, nah, this is never going to happen. And others were really intrigued, and slowly they would resonate with this vision. And now we knew we had a match to come play for us. And so when we actually establish this too, and you mentioned, Kevin, it's important that it's not just we're going to be here in 5 years, but how we're going to be, where are we going to be in year 4, in year 3, in year 2, and in year 1. So for the player and the team, it'd be like, this is where we are. So this year, we only want to get so far, and that is a big step compared to where we were last year. So this year, we want to have a winning season. That is the first thing we want to do. We're not talking about winning championship. We're talking about establishing great habit to help us to build this foundation so we can have a winning season. And then we kept moving up like this every year. And this way, the whole vision seemed slowly realistic, whereas the overall part of it maybe seemed unrealistic.
Yeah, that's one of the things that struck me about it is that, yeah, I mean, yeah, you'd love to win a championship in 3 years, but really you say this is our process to get there in 5 years. And even though it's a very great, your word, grandiose goal from the start, one that many people didn't really believe or buy into, when they started to see the stair steps along that way, I think it made a big difference. I think that for anyone who were to read this book, if all you got was that would be of great value, I would say. I want to, you've hinted at it, and I just hinted at it too. One of the things that you wrote that I agree with wholeheartedly, and I'd like you to talk a little bit more about, is this phrase, trust the process. I think that so often leaders have trouble with this, and they have trouble helping their folks see this. So what does it mean to you to say trust the process?
And I want to say that throughout my career, I have had trouble with that sentence, that slogan as well, which is why I talk about it in the book. It was much easier for me at the beginning, when there's no pressure and the team wasn't very good, to trust the process. Well, we're going to turn this around. And so we're gonna engage ourselves into it and go for it. As the years go by and we try to stay on top, trusting the process becomes sometimes a little more challenging and difficult. And it's a reminder that it must be done. There's no shortcut. And so one of the example I give all the time is, and this is where all of us, me included, have sometimes an issue with trusting the process, is that we want results now. We want to see the change now. And as society evolves and electronics evolves and we get so much faster in everything, so now having to wait for anything seems excruciating. And so in the trusting the process, it's having the ability to forego the now for something later that's going to be better, best. So it's foregoing the good to get the great. And that requires a whole lot of self, you have to be able to self-contain yourself. You have to be able to say, yes, we could. I think a business example, I think a lot of people go for the small fish or the small kill, the small amount of money, or the money now, as opposed to say, we might not make as much money now, but the goal is going to be here. And to stay aligned with that is very difficult. So in coaching, in basketball, I made some very difficult decisions along the way to sit out my starters because I wanted to teach a culture. And by sitting out the starter, I understood that we might lose the game, but we might gain a culture that's going to help us win a championship in 4 or 5 years. And that's exactly what happened. And so, but losing those games are super difficult. And sometimes, thankfully, I made the hard decision and we still won the game, which was amazing. And then you go home and you feel really happy. But the ability to discern this and to say, I'm going to hold on right now because I really want what's great. I just don't want what's good, acceptable. That is what trusting the process means.
I love that. I really do. We talked a little bit about your circles, and I probably should have said this earlier. We talked about organizational skills and individual development and leader attributes. And, everybody has a list of leader attributes, leadership skills, behaviors, competencies. We use all sorts of words for this. There's all sorts of lists. We could Google it, find all sorts of stuff. What I'd like you to share is, what's one of the leader attributes that you've studied, that you've noticed, that you think is perhaps underappreciated? Like, we could all make a long list, but like, what's one that you think people don't think enough about, pay enough attention to, what would that be for you?
I'm so glad you asked the question. I had actually a meeting yesterday with my mentor, and we were discussing something that he shared with me. So I'll share it, and that is the one that I know is of utmost importance and definitely overlooked by everybody. And he said, Chantal, you somehow, as you grow along the years and you get older and you get really good at your job, you haven't lost the ability of being adaptable or the intention to want to continue to learn. And it is something that I think he said he doesn't notice in most people. And I was a little surprised. I just thought, well, everybody wants to continue to learn. And no, people leave that, I think, behind as they grow older, they get set in their ways. And for me, the quest for learning is one of the leaders that I addressed in the book that we found is super important in all these very successful leaders and coaches and individuals. So that is something that I never wanted to lose. And so to go out there and to be able to say, okay, I'm going to continue to learn and expand myself. And I think it becomes difficult sometimes because maybe our strengths, our weaknesses are what they are, and we can only maybe improve so much in certain areas. But to still say, okay, I'm going to continue to learn, and not just about our weaknesses, but in general, opening ourselves up to new concept, new ideas, something that maybe we find challenging in life in general. I don't know how I feel about this, to learn about that. That is a really, really important factor of what makes good leaders.
I want to ask you about a couple things you talk about in the book that I think people will find really useful. And the first one is something that you have, and that's a council of advisors. Now I'm going to spell council different than you do, but I'm going to have it with a C instead of an S. But the point here is, and I should have said process earlier instead of process. Sorry about that.
Oh.
But you talk about having a council of advisors. You mentioned a mentor. You talk about mentors in the book.
Yeah.
But this is slightly different. And I think this is something that a lot of leaders in organizations, wherever you are, you're a frontline leader, you're a leader of leaders. You don't have to be a CEO for this idea to bear fruit for you. What do you mean, Chantal, by the idea of a council of advisors?
So at the eve of winning our first national championship, we're sitting in a room, and I've got my regular assistant coaches with me, which have been along all of them unbelievable people. And I also had my mentor. I had somebody that helped us with stats. I had somebody that helped me with the offense. And those were gentlemen that, I just receive advice every week throughout the season that maybe my coaches didn't really know about, but I had invited them to be part of it. So as we have this round table, I invite them to sit at a table, and here I am with about 9 or 10 different individuals, and my mentor is just watching from afar. And for me, I'm listening to everybody's feedback, my assistant coaches, but also this one a gentleman that knows nothing about sport, is not an athlete, never coached, but looks through data and stats and analytics. I listened to this one gentleman that helped me figure out our offense better. And I'm making decisions in my head based on the feedback. And when I leave the room, first I could tell that some of my assistant coaches were a little uneasy because usually it's just a smaller group of us. And now suddenly I had brought more people at the table, and that was uneasy for them. But for me, that was very important because I always say, there is no room, there is no ego. We need to be able to make the best decision for the best of the team, the best of the program, the best of the organization. And I'm the person in charge. I'm the directly responsible individual to make that decision. So I need that feedback. And my mentor, we were walking back to the hotel, and he said, wow, boy, I don't know how your assistant coach feels about this. And I said, it's okay. It's we as a group need to win. And he says, I've rarely seen somebody sitting with so many people, and you handled it very well. And he was very complimentary about this. But that's where the council of advisor come from. It's having more than just the group that you feel comfortable with. It's having other people that might give something completely different, a different viewpoint that then we must consider if we want to make sure that we leave no rocks unturned, so to speak, before heading into some big decisions.
I love that. I think all of us can think about having that group of people and you being conscious about choosing them and what role they bring to and what perspective that they bring. What I heard you say, and of course I read in the book as well, is that each of those people brought a different perspective and perhaps helped you see something that you might not have otherwise have seen. You tell a story in the book that you can tell as much of the backstory as you want, but I think the idea of doing it is incredibly useful. And it's the story is about putting our burdens at the foot of the hill. So talk to us about what you were trying to accomplish and how it helped your team to do what you did.
Yeah, we had lost a game to qualify for the second national championship, and we were only very fortunate that year that there was a buy-in tournament. We could go to another tournament to try to win the tournament to go back to the national, which was a format that wasn't used before. So, and I felt that, as a potentially repeating national champion, there was a lot of stress on the players, and on me too. I mean, we had never repeated, and we wanted to do it 2 years in a row. And basically what I did with them is I brought them at the foot of a hill in Windsor, and I had them carry some weights in their arms. And, we talked about how we felt about, having just lost that game. And Kevin, if you remember in the book, we were ranked number 1 in the country, and we lost that game from 49 points, by 49 points, which is like unheard of, and it was unheard of in my career. And I thought, oh my goodness, and we were slaughtered. It was ironic to replay that same team in that play-in tournament. So that team had wanted to host it because they never thought they were going to beat us, so they wanted to get the back door, and they sent us into the back door. Anyway, we had 3 days to refocus, and it wasn't that much strategy. There was maybe a small adjustment on our ability to attack with contact, but apart from that, it was all in our head. It was all in our emotion. And I had identified that. And so I brought them to the bottom of the hill. And so now here they are back with their weights. And I tell them to start going up the hill. And one player looks at me defiantly and she says, "How many times, coach?" And I said, 49, to replicate the point. And that sounds crazy. And I wanted to make sure everybody knows that we didn't do it. We didn't, my point was just to, as they started to do it, I wanted to feel their guts, and they just started to go. And I said, "Stop." And I said, "Let's drop your weights. I asked you to go up the hill, but I never asked you to carry those weights with you. So why are you carrying those?" And they thought, oh, they didn't really know. And it was this image to just like release your burden. If you want to achieve a goal and you want to climb, you want to peak, you got to release all the burdens that come with this. You got to release the idea that there's so much pressure, you're just never going to get there. And in this easy way, we just went up this small hill one time. And there was a lot of freedom and liberation, and a lot of pressure went off, and we went back and won the game and ended up winning the national. We never lost again that year, and ended up winning the second national championship.
I just love that, the imagery of it, but I appreciate you sharing the story, because I think that oftentimes our sort of back to where we started, you as a leader aren't probably coaching a sports team unless it's your kid's little league team, right? And yet we can all recognize the situation, Chantal, that you just shared in terms of our teams feeling stress and pressure, and why do we need to carry that, and how can we as leaders help people let that go enough to help them move forward. I just really love that. Thank you for sharing that. I've got a couple of more things I want to ask before we finish, Chantal, but is there anything that you hoped I would ask or thought I might ask that I didn't?
You did a really good job, really good overview of the book. You did mention at the beginning that I had the opportunity to coach some men's professional basketball team, and maybe one of the anecdote of this part is that in the book as well, so there's the whole kind of sequence about how we transformed the program in 5 years with the women. But my challenge for me when I was hired to be the GM and the head coach of the men's team, which I didn't know the product, I didn't know the market, I did not know the players, it was very challenging for me. But could I then reapply the theory, now that I was more experienced in applying it, into a shorter period of time? And so why it took me, 6 years to change a women's basketball program from zero to first, from a franchise that did not exist entering a league, could I, in the first year, replicate something so much faster? And we had 6 months to sign the players, do the draft, build a good team, hire the staff, even help with preparing the uniforms, like what the uniform is going to look like. And in 6 months, we did that, and we went and we brought the league to the team to the league final in our first year as a franchise. And so, to me, it was I became more skilled in terms of knowing how to transform organization, and that's a really nice, I think, caveat at the end. And we call this the overtime in the book, showing that in a completely different market with a completely different product, this still works and it's transferable and can be used in another way.
So you have made your profession something that you grew up loving to do, playing and now coaching the game. But I'm curious, outside of basketball, what do you do for fun?
I love to read, and I continue to read, and I read all the time. And in order to even give an example of how I like to be challenged, I picked up a book that I had heard about that I knew was going to challenge me in a different way in terms of mental and scientific and all that stuff. So I picked up Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself by Dr. Joe Dispenza. And poof, that is, I'm still reading this book. It is really challenging in all kinds of beautiful ways, and taking a scientific approach on the changes that our thoughts can have on our feelings and the result that feelings have on our balance within our body and within the environment around us. So, just a really, I mean, for somebody that has a master's degree in sports psychology, and that also in my undergrad did some physics, the science approach is really good, and I think really helpful to even continue to better me as a leader. So that is what I'm currently reading, and I highly recommend it. But it is a challenging read because it's going to challenge our thoughts, but what a better place to be than when we are humans to have our thoughts being challenged.
Well, I love that. And I don't think that Chantal can hear me. So we will end this differently than we normally do. Let me tell you, everybody, we will put all of the links to get to Chantal's book, which is titled Dare to Win, the Blueprint for Building and Leading High Performance in Championship Teams. We'll put the link to that in the show notes, as well as the link to the book that she was just talking about. And we'll also give you a link to her social media. So if you want to connect with her, you can do exactly that. So I'm going to close by asking you all the question that I ask you every single week, which is this. Now what? What are you going to do now as a result of what you've just heard and learned? Because hearing it is one thing, applying it is something very different. So it's my hope that you will think about what you took from this conversation, whether you're a sports fan or not.
Thank you so much, Kevin, for really having me on the show. It's always such a pleasure to discuss with somebody that is as knowledgeable as you on leadership, and that has also taken the time to read the book. I really appreciate that, and wish everybody that listened all the best.
All right. So all the best from both of us to all of you. It has been a pleasure to have you. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you're subscribed wherever you're watched or listened so you don't miss any future episodes, including next week, when we'll be back with another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. Thanks, everybody.